Hey sports fans, this is the first time that I'm doing Torah talk on my own, so I discombobulated, even dropped my kippah. So gather around mums and daughters, fathers and sons. Time for another exciting edition of Torah Talk. Rabbi Rabs is apparently not joining us tonight, so I will let him describe why he's not doing the show tonight, and I'm going to proceed on the assumption that the partnership between Rabbi Rabs and I is over. We've been doing these Torah talks together since June, the end of June, so we had about nine months worth of Torah talks, and now I'll be looking for someone else to do Torah talk with, because this is not a show I want to do on my own most of the time. This will be the first time I've done Torah talk on my own, so we'll see if anyone even shows up. But looking for someone who's knowledgeable about Torah. Doesn't matter to me if they're an atheist, if they're a Reformed Jew, Conservative Jew, Reconstructionist Jew, Orthodox Jew, any variety of Orthodox Jew. I'm just looking for someone who's knowledgeable about Torah and would like to do this show with me. So each week, been doing it on Monday nights, but I guess we could do it pretty much any time, I talk about the Torah portion. So I'm used to having a sidekick who does 80% of the talking, and I just kind of do the traffic, weather, and sports. And it's 7:05 in Pico Robertson, and traffic is hot and heavy on Robertson Boulevard. But now I'm going to have to pull my own weight for the first time and not just like rely on someone else to do the show. So I'm even going to turn off my phone so it doesn't interrupt the show. This week's Torah portion is the Parashat Acharei, which is Leviticus 16:1 to 18:30. So every week there's a different Torah portion that Jews chant aloud in synagogue on Shabbos morning. Though there are Reform shuls that will read it aloud on Friday night, because if they just read it on Saturday morning, for one thing, they may not have any services, and they did have services, next to nobody would show up. I remember going to this Reform temple, the one in Santa Monica, and I didn't know if it was that one, but going to this Reform temple, and they held Purim on the wrong night. I remember Stephen S. Wise would do that sometimes. They'd hold Purim on the wrong night, because like the regular night for Purim wasn't convenient. And yeah, I've been to Reform shuls where they read the Torah on Friday nights, like passed it around the congregation. They didn't read the whole Parsha, because that would take too long and put people to sleep, so they just read some snippets. And they just read it on Friday night, because no one would show up if they did it on its regular Shabbos morning time. But most Jews around the world will read the Torah aloud on Shabbos morning, and they do a different section every week. The Torah is the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So this week we study Parashat Acharei. So that's Leviticus chapter 16 to Leviticus 18:30. So you may wonder, why are you working the digiflex, moral leader? And it's because my hands are weak, and so various muscles were getting strained, and my physical therapist sold me this digiflex for $20, and by holding it like that, supposed to do it for 6 seconds and then release, trade hands, it builds up the strength in my hands so that I can continue to do my blogging and this Torah talk. So it doesn't even look like anyone's watching. Without the rabbi, no one's watching. Okay, that's hard on my ego. So, chapter 16, Leviticus. So Hashem speaks to Moses after the death of Aaron's 2 sons, Nadav and Avihu. And the Torah isn't always chronological. So the end of the last Parashat was Mitzorah, and it was all about seminal discharges and genital discharges. So here are the last two Pesukim, the last two verses from the last Parsha. This is the law of the man with a discharge, and from whom there is a seminal discharge, through which he becomes contaminated. Concerning a woman who suffers through her separation, and concerning a person who has his flow, whether male or female, concerning a man who lies with a contaminated woman. So that was the end of the last Parsha. So out of this Parsha, as Hashem speaks to Moses after the death of Aaron's two sons, and they approached before Hashem, and they died. So this is going back really a few chapters in the book of Leviticus when Nadav and Abihu kicked the bucket. They didn't just kick the bucket on their own account. God killed them, and the Torah is very explicitly about God killed them. So we're back on the story of Nadav and Abihu. Supposedly they brought strange fire into the sanctuary. And I say strange fire because that's a term I've used when I dabbled with Kundalini Yoga for a couple of years. And I'd say almost all Orthodox rabbis would say that for a Jew to participate in such yoga, it's a form of idolatry, of Avodah Zorah. And I thought, it's just some nice stretching and some groovy tunes and nice people. And I don't think this is another religion that I'm practicing by going to Kundalini Yoga. Then I started having a lot of mixed feelings. And I remember I was going to one Talmud class, and the rabbi named the studio I was going to and said, "Mamish, this is Avodah Zorah. This is idol worship." I thought, So we do a lot of chanting in the classes, and thought, well, this is a yoga studio run by Sikhs. Sikhs believe in the one God, so what could be so terrible? But anyway, I gave it up after a couple of years. Yes, in part because I couldn't afford it, and also in part because I felt like I was dabbling with a strange fire, that perhaps a Jew should not be here. So, strange fire is something that is a concern of the Torah, and it's a concern of this week's Parsha and the story of Nadav and Abihu. And it's interesting, verse 2 says, Hashem says to Moses, "Speak to Aaron your brother. He shall not come at all times into the sanctuary within the curtain, in front of the curtain that is upon the ark, so that he shall not die." And it's very rare that God in the Torah speaks directly to Aaron. He, in the last 4 books of the Torah, speaks almost exclusively just to Moshe. So God's really picky about who he speaks to. And there are a lot of people like that too. I mean, for instance, hot girls, hot chicks, attractive women, they're hit on all the time by guys, because often guys don't pick up social cues nearly as well as women do, and they see an attractive girl, so they go talk to her, and if she's halfway nice, then men are just going to glomp onto her, because guys tend to think that if a girl talks to them for 5 minutes, it means she wants to sleep with them. But women often just are being nice. So that's why hot chicks are often bitchy, because they're just hit on so much that if they weren't bitchy, if they didn't have that wall up, if they weren't picky about who they talk to, they'd just have this constant stream of guys glomping onto them and asking for their phone number and asking them out and just generally bothering them. So hot chicks tend to be picky about who they talk to. And also anyone who's highly accomplished. Let's say you go to shul and there are some people in the shul who are highly accomplished. They're generally not going to be as friendly as everyone else, because if they gave people half an opening, then they'd be deluged by people who want to get close to them because they're either rich or successful, or they've accomplished things in Hollywood and people want to know, what's it like working with Brad Pitt? I know, there's one screenwriter who has that problem that people always want to know, what's it like working with this star? And people who are highly accomplished don't want to be, generally speaking, bothered by a bunch of nebbishes. So life naturally sorts out into various levels of hierarchy. And God's picky about who he speaks to, and a lot of powerful people are picky about who they speak to. So